to righteous rage, spreading the word that this will be a just mission, the only way to protect the children of Woodbury. The racetrack becomes the official command center, with stockpiles of materiel and ordnance gathered in the garages underneath the stadium and under rain tarps across the infield. The governor's inner sanctum is established high up in the press boxes, with maps of Meriwether County taped up onto the walls and across the surfaces of folding tables. Late at night, the one-armed warrior can be glimpsed pacing the press box, alone, silhouetted by the yellow light of bare bulbs, compulsively studying the 23-mile distance between Woodbury and the prison, plotting the invasion with the intensity of Eisenhower planning the Allied attack on Anzio. By the end of that week, Lily has made an exhaustive inventory of the armaments at Woodbury's disposal. They have 27 crates of 7.62 and 5.56 rounds and enough magazines for a small army, as well as enough Kevlar to outfit half the adults. They have 3 50-caliber machine guns and scores of rifles, of both the assault and the long-range sniper variety. They have enough fuel to convey at least a dozen vehicles, most of them from the guard station, across the 23 miles of rural roads to the battlefront. They have 6 mine-resistant armored trucks, a couple of cargo vehicles, a personnel carrier, 2 Humvees, and a pair of big Buick 4-door sedans that will do in a pinch. Gabe spends the bulk of the second week getting the single Abrams M1 tank, discovered in mothballs at the guard station, in working order. The armored tank features a remotely operated 50-caliber turret on top and a 105mm cannon with 42 rounds in the hull. Since the tank's turbine engine runs on diesel, Gabe has to send 2 separate parties on fuel runs to nearby truck stops for the last drops of diesel available in the county. By the end of that second week of waiting and girding and preparing, Lily has completely shed her fears and finds herself sleeping soundly for the first time since the plague began. She has no dreams now, and she awakes every morning replenished, her spine tingling with anticipation for the fight. Even Austin is on board. He has been target shooting regularly and has gotten very handy with the sniper rifle. Lily feels a strange tie binding her with Austin, not just the shared grief over the miscarriage, but also the galvanizing purpose of their mission, their common hunger for a better future. They have convinced themselves that this is the only way, and the collective resolve has drawn them closer together. The following Tuesday night, after dusk has settled down on the town, almost 3 weeks after Gabe's discovery of the prison, Lily finishes loading the last of the high-capacity ammo magazines that are lined up on long tables in the corridor under the racetrack. She decides to head home, and she is just emerging from the west exit, stepping into the darkness of the Speedway parking lot, when she hears a shuffling noise behind her, coming from the shadows of the portal, that raises her hackles and causes her to draw her Ruger and whirl around with the muzzle coming up instinctively in the general vicinity of the noise. A voice out of the darkness. "Young lady walking around a bad neighborhood alone at night." The slender male figure lurking in the shadows smokes a cigarette, the orange firefly of its tip the only thing visible. "Is a recipe for disaster." "Who's there?" Lily holds her gun on the silhouette shrouded in the shadows. The husky voice sounds familiar, but she can't be sure. "Identify yourself, please." The governor steps out of the shadows into the pool of yellow security light. "Good to see your reflexes are sound," he says, tossing the cigarette. "Jesus, you scared the shit out of me." She holsters her gun and feels her neck muscles relaxing. "You shouldn't surprise people around this place. Not if you want to keep your head from being shot off." "Point well taken." He smiles at her, the fingers of his surviving hand stroking his whiskers thoughtfully. He wears his new trademark fashion statement, the makeshift eye patch, along with his customary camo pants and hunting vest, the stump of his right arm swaddled in yellowing bandages. In the scant illumination, his single surviving eye shimmers. "I've been keeping tabs on you, Lily." "Oh?" You've been whipping these people into shape, and I appreciate it. We gotta be ready. You got that right. He tilts his good eye toward her, the iris glittering. Especially since we're gonna be riding just before dawn. She looks at him. Tomorrow? Yes, ma'am. He holds her in the thrall of that single eye. You're the first one to know this. Didn't want to get everybody all bent out of shape too soon. I want to come in from the east with the rising sun, through the trees. Goddamn trucks make a lot of noise, don't want to tip anybody off. Pass the word for me, will you? Absolutely. She gives him a nod, her guts going cold, her brain swimming with anticipation. We're ready, Governor. We're with you 110%. Eh? Good. He rubs his chin some more. How about that hunk of burning love of yours? You finally master that scope? Austin? He's good. He's ready. We're all ready. You want me to drive the lead truck? You take the transport wagon. I'll have Gabe take the lead in the armored rig on the way out. We're going to take it nice and slow. Right. The tank is fast. It tops out at 50-some miles per hour. But we're going to take it nice and easy. Got it. She looks at him. Where are you going to ride? On the way out? I'm going to be in the back of your transport truck with the boys. Okay. I'll be on the bitch box the whole way, staying in close contact with you and Gabe and Gus and Rudy. But when we get close, I want to pull everybody over. Say a few words, get everybody ready to rock. Makes sense? When we're ready to launch, I'm going to want to be riding on the tank. Good. Lily licks her lips. Something I've been wondering about, though. What's that? What about the people in the prison? He looks at her. What about them? She shrugs. What if they, surrender? Wave the white flag or whatever. The governor gazes out at the night. He pulls another cigarette from his vest and sparks it with his Zippo, a wreath of smoke curling around his head. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, he murmurs in a low, smoke-cured drawl. He looks at her. You sure you're ready? Yeah. What do you mean? Yes, absolutely. Yes. You feeling okay? Yes. I want to take these bastards down as bad as you. Why do you ask? He takes a deep breath, looking at her. I know about what happened. You know about... with the baby. What? Gooseflesh rashes down her arms and legs, her midsection clenching. How did you... Bob told me. He looks down. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. It's hard on a woman, that kind of thing. That's all I'm saying. Lily swallows hard. I'm ready, Governor. I told you I'm ready, and I meant it. He studies her in the wan yellow security light. It makes her very uneasy, the way he's looking at her, with a trace of pity in his eyes. Almost makes her ashamed. She wants to fight alongside this man now. This imperfect, vicious, coarse, blunt instrument of a man more than anything else she has ever wanted. He takes another drag off his smoke. I need you, girlfriend. You got me, she tells him. I got plenty of muscle. He burns that cyclopean gaze into her. But you're a thinking person. A natural leader. Plus you're damn handy with a gun. I need you on that front line, Lily. She gives him a nod. I understand. He takes another drag. What happened to you? It just goes to show what a dangerous world this is with these motherfuckers out there. They need to be taken care of before something worse happens, and we're gonna be the ones to do it. No matter what it takes. You follow me?" She looks at him for a long moment before responding. Her voice comes out cold and flat. "I'll see you in the morning," she says. And then she turns and walks away with fists clenched at her sides. The governor stands in the shadows of that exit portal, watching Lily Call walk away into the night. He can tell by the way she's walking that she's ready. She's ready to kill for the cause. She vanishes around the corner of Main Street, the night breeze blowing litter in her wake. Philip takes a deep breath, tosses the cigarette, and snubs it out with his boot. He has one last thing to tend to before the next day dawns. One last member of the tribe to square away before the glorious blood can flow. He walks down the portico toward the street, whistling now, feeling more alive than he's ever felt in his life, his brain scoured clean of all doubt. The war has begun. Part 2. Doomsday Clock. The ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them. With their households, and all Korah's men, and all their possessions. They went down alive into the grave, with everything they owned. The earth closed over them. Numbers 16:23. Chapter 10. Bob Stuckey stands wringing his gnarled hands in the airless, fetid-smelling foyer of the governor's apartment. Woozy from being dragged out of bed at 3 a.m, he tries to get his bearings and not stare at the dead child straining against her chain on the wall 10 feet away. The thing that was once a little girl wears a tiny blue pinafore dress with flowers on it, the fabric so stained and tattered and soaked with filth now that it looks as though someone fed it through a meat grinder, her pigtails still flagging off her monster's head like a cruel joke. Her eyes pop wide, a fish with a hook stuck in its mouth, the toothless black lips gumming at the air as she reaches for the closest human. "I'll be back soon, honey. Don't you worry," the governor says, kneeling in front of her. He smiles at her with the strangest look on his face. If asked to describe the look, Bob would have to say it resembles a death mask, a clown's rictus planted on the face of a corpse. "You won't even miss me. I'll be back so fast. You be good for Uncle Bob, okay? You be a good girl." The penny thing moans and gums at the air. The governor puts his arms around her and gives her a hug. "I know. I love you too." Bob looks away, filled with a strange and overwhelming surge of emotions, disgust, sadness, fear, pity, all of them jumbled up in his guts like a ball of flame. He is one of only 3 human beings whom the governor has trusted with the knowledge of Penny's existence, and right now, Bob isn't so sure he wants to be one of those confidants. He stares at the carpet and swallows back the nausea. "Bob?" The governor must have seen the sour look on the man's face, because he now speaks firmly to him, as though gently chastising a child. "You sure you're going to be able to do this? I'm serious. She means a lot to me." Bob braces himself against the wall and takes a deep breath. "I can watch her just fine, Governor. I'm sober as a judge. I'll keep an eye on her. Don't you worry about a thing." The governor lets out a sigh, gazing back at the drooling creature in front of him. "You can let her walk around if you want, but I won't judge you if you leave it tied up." The governor stares at the undulating black lips of the little girl thing. "She can't bite anymore, but she can still be a handful. And we don't have anything to feed her right now, so she's going to get a little cranky." Bob gives a nod from across the foyer. Beads of sweat breaking out on his forehead, his eyes burning. He realizes right then that he's standing about as close to the thing as he ever wants to get. The governor looks at Bob. "Anyone dies, though, and I mean anyone. You make sure she gets fed. You understand what I'm saying?" "Yeah." Bob tries not to stare at the thing. "You got it." The governor gives the girl thing one last embrace, a delicate little stringer of bile clinging to his shoulder as he finally pulls away. A little over an hour later, at 5:14 a.m., the governor stands beside Gabe on the north end of the Woodbury town square. A single security lamp canted off an adjacent telephone pole shines a beam of light down at them through tiny clouds of moths fluttering haphazardly in the glare. Both men now wear the heavy Kevlar body armor procured from the guard station, the chest pieces and vests giving the two of them a fierce, martial gravitas in the shimmering darkness. The pre-dawn chill shows in faint puffs of vapor pluming from their mouths as they survey the 23 members of the makeshift militia, standing at attention in front of them. Nearly 24 men and women laden with ammo bandoliers and gun belts heavy with firearms and extra rounds stand shoulder to shoulder across the curb, facing their leader, awaiting final orders. Behind them, the single-file row of vehicles, all fueled and idling, stretches down half the block, headlamps shining toward the exit gate. They are about to leave 25 of their fellow villagers behind with nary a firearm or a bullet, the sum total of their arsenal now sitting on the flatbeds and trucks and piled into cargo holds. The governor asked the Stearns to stay behind and watch the town, and when Barbara objected, after all she and David are among the best shooters in Woodbury, the governor told her he wasn't asking her to do this. He was fucking ordering her to do it. "We have them in our sights, my friends," Philip Blake now announces to the brigade, his booming voice echoing across the dark square. Each and every face present that morning reflects the gravity of the moment. Underneath the brims of baseball caps and headbands, their eyes glint with sullen purpose and thinly veiled fear. Fingers brush nervously against trigger guards and along the stocks of assault rifles. These are not professional soldiers by any means, but Philip can see the cold slap of survival instinct waking them up now, girding them, galvanizing them. He applies more of the stimulant to the group with his stentorian voice. "These motherfuckers killed Doc Stevens! They murdered Bruce Cooper!" He scans the row of somber faces, and finally sees Lily standing at the far end of the group. Austin stands next to her with his sniper rifle on his shoulder, his head cocked with grave resolve. Her hair pulled back in a tight, businesslike ponytail. Lily has her hands on her hips, palming the handles of her twin Rugers, her Remington MSR rifle shouldered behind her. For the briefest instant, something about the look in her eyes bothers Philip. Maybe he's imagining it, but she looks as though she's deep in thought, ruminating about something when she should be humming like a tuning fork with kill lust. Philip holds her gaze as he booms, "They mutilated me, and it's time for them to pay!" Lily meets his gaze from 20 feet away and holds it for an endless moment. Then she nods. The governor roars, "Pile in and let's move!" At 5:30 a.m. on the nose, in a flurry of revving engines, creaking chassis, and chaotic shouting, the heavily armed convoy finally embarks. In the middle of the pack, Lily follows the red taillights in front of her as best she can, both hands riveted to the gigantic steering wheel of the rumbling 2.5-ton M35 cargo truck. She can't see shit. The drought of recent days has left the road out of Woodbury as dusty and granular as a sandbox, and now the procession kicks up a fog bank of haze in the pre-dawn darkness as it thunders out the south gate. Lily can barely see the truck's 15-foot-long rear payload bay through the back window, enclosed by guard railing and filled with passengers. She feels like a midget in the enormous cab, her foot barely reaching the accelerator pedal on the floor, the air reeking of the flop sweat of generations of nervous National Guardsmen. Austin sits next to her in the passenger seat, cradling the two-way radio in his lap. Every few moments, the voice of the governor crackles out of the speaker, admonishing Gabe to keep it under 40 miles per hour to keep the formation tight and to make sure he takes 85 south, not north, goddammit, and to turn his fucking headlights off before he wakes up the entire county. Years ago, Lily spent a lot of couch time at a Marietta mental health clinic working on her panic attacks. The shrink was a kindly middle-aged woman named Dr. Cara Leone, who preferred talk therapy to medication, and devoted a lot of time to parsing the reasons for Lily's racing thoughts. Partly hormonal, partly growing pangs, partly neurochemical, and partly grief over her mother's lost battle with breast cancer. Lily's anxiety attacks always came upon her in a public place, in a crowd, accompanied by a pandemonium of thoughts tumbling around her brain. She was ugly. She was a loser. She was overweight. She had cancer in her genes. People were staring at her. She was going to faint. She couldn't breathe. She felt the world spinning. She had a brain tumor. She was going to die right here in this grocery store. Happily, she either outgrew these spells or worked her way through them. Until now. Following the cargo truck in front of her, its glowing red taillights veiled behind a miasma of exhaust and dust, she feels the stirrings of a panic attack coming on. She hasn't felt these sensations for at least 10 years, but sure enough, she feels them now. She senses her thoughts slipping off their spindle, making her dizzy as the fears slide around her brain, sending gooseflesh across the back of her neck. She stares at those glowing red orbs in front of her. She stares and stares until they become 2 red dwarf planets floating in space. And she concentrates on her training. She thinks of the lessons Bob taught her from his days in basic training. The zen of the sniper. The bullet will travel with a curved trajectory. The sniper must compensate for this by aiming higher at longer distances. If the distance to the target is unknown, the shooter can calculate muzzle height by using some sort of landmark close to the target, a utility pole or fence post, and then extrapolating the adjustment for a nearby target. She thinks about this as she drives, stuffing the fear back down her throat through sheer concentration. The headshot is the preferred goal. The average head is 6 inches wide, the average human shoulders are 20 inches apart, and the average distance from a person's pelvis to the top of their head is 40 inches. In front of her, the cargo truck makes a 90-degree turn into Miller Drive, and she calmly follows, turning the wheel and gently commandeering the M35 through the dust and down the 2-lane. She feels better. She feels her racing thoughts settling into the cobra calm of the sniper's mindset, a state that Bob once rhapsodized about while in his cups. The bullet type will determine the drop rate. The Remington shoots a .308 caliber 175-grain projectile at 2,685 feet per second. At 600 yards, a 17-degree of elevation adjustment would have to be made to hit the target. She feels the convoy speeding up in front of her, the speedometer edging past 40 miles per hour. She follows. Austin says something next to her. Huh? She shoots a glance over at him, feeling as though she's just awakened from a deep sleep. Did you say something? He looks at her, the tension like a mask over his boyish features. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Good. Austin nods and gazes out the side window at the horizon. Lily notices the sky has changed color behind the trees, lightening from a deep black to a washed-out gray. Dawn is just around the corner. She grips the wheel tighter and follows the procession down a dirt exit road, the storm cloud of dust kicking up higher. Every few moments she glances out at the side mirror and sees the governor standing in back amid the silent men and women squeezed like silverware in a drawer. He looks like he's crossing the fucking Delaware, she thinks. And over the space of that instant, she experiences a wave of contrary emotions. She's a little embarrassed for him, the way he's standing back there with his rakish eye patch and body armor, his head upturned in defiance, his one good hand holding onto the cab in order to steady himself against the bumps, looking like a wounded Spartan general out for revenge. All of which she realizes is true. But another part of her drinks in the sight of the governor's Stonewall Jackson routine. He is the baddest of the badasses, and she feels confidence coursing through her now, knowing that she's going into battle with this man. Who better to remove this cancer? 15 minutes later, the sun has begun to blaze bright orange behind the Palisades, and the road begins to wind up a gentle grade. The forest on either side of the convoy thickens, the smell of pine and humus and walker droppings wafting through the cab's interior. Another glance out of the side mirror reveals the governor in the cargo bay and back, peering into the distance and fumbling one-handed with his map, which flutters in the breeze. He grabs the walkie-talkie off his belt. The other passengers, seated in rows on either side of him, lift their rifles and check their chambers, their jaws tensing in anticipation. The governor thumbs the talk button. The sound of his voice crackles in the truck's cab. "We're closing in on the hill that overlooks the prison. Right, Gabe?" Gabe's voice sizzles and sputters. "We are, boss. Prison's about 500 yards away, down in the flatlands on the edge of the county line." "Okay," the governor's voice replies. "Here's what we're gonna do. Find a wide spot to pull off, preferably with an eye shot of the place. Copy that." The morning sun hammers down in the forest, filtering in gossamer ribbons through the boughs, the ghostly cottonwood tufts floating through the beams, giving off an almost primordial air. It is now exactly 6:15 a.m. Gabe finds a narrow clearing to pull off, and the rest of the convoy follows, moving slowly, keeping engine noise as quiet as possible, one after another gently coming to a stop. Lily pulls the M35 over behind the cargo truck, shoves the shifter into neutral, and yanks on the parking brake. For a long moment everybody sits in silence. Lily can hear her bloodstream pulsing in her ears. Then, one by one, the sound of doors gently clicking open signals the point of no return. Lily and Austin climb out of the cab, their joints sore from the tension, their stomachs queasy with nerves. Lily hears rifle bolts clang softly in the cool blue shadows of the trees. Rounds are fed into chambers. Straps are tightened on ammo harnesses. Kevlar vests are adjusted, sunglasses go on, and everybody stands by the front grills of their softly idling vehicles. "Here we are," the governor announces from his perch on the back of Lily's cargo truck. The sound of his voice makes everybody go still. He makes a grand gesture toward a break in the trees to the east, a dirt path leading down a gentle rise into the valley. The prison is visible in the heat waves about 400 yards away. So close we can smell their evil. All heads turn toward the conglomeration of stone buildings in the distance, the complex looking like some kind of exotic Bedouin compound plopped down in the middle of nowhere. The low-slung dormitories are tucked behind layers of chain link and razor wire, the guard towers unmanned, empty, and impotent. The place calls out to Lily. A haunted house, doomed and desecrated by ghosts, its warrens once filled with the dregs of society. It now looks as though it's asleep. A network of dirt roads surrounding the outer perimeter, the only movement at present, a mob of walkers, as thick as a subway platform at rush hour, wandering the edges of the fencing. They look so small and dark at this distance they resemble bugs. "Try and keep pace with the tanks as we close in," the governor orders from his platform, speaking loudly enough to be heard, but not so loud as to announce their presence to anybody, at least not just yet. "I want to seem like an unrelenting wave on the horizon. We want to intimidate 'em right away. Make 'em sloppy." Lily pulls her rifle off her shoulder and checks the breech. It's locked and loaded, her spine tingling with anticipation. "When it begins. When the killing starts," the governor goes on, surveying with a single eye each and every one of his warriors. "Don't let their appearance deceive you. You will see women, children even, but I assure you these people are monsters. No different than the biters we kill without a second thought." Lily shares a tense glance with Austin, who stands next to her with his fists clenched. He nods at her. His expression is heartbreaking. A once boyish face now aged many years in the harsh light of dawn. "Life out here," the governor tells them. "It has changed these people. Twisted them into creatures who will kill without mercy, without thought, with no regard for human life. They do not deserve to live." Now the governor climbs over the side rail and hops down to the ground. Lily watches him, her pulse quickening. She knows exactly where he's going. He strides over to the lead vehicle, his boots crunching in the gravel, his gloved hand creaking as it makes a fist. Gabe sits behind the wheel of the head truck, leaning out the open window with a puzzled expression. "Everything okay, boss?" The governor looks up at him. "Get in line with the others. I want the whole fleet spread across the width of the valley, and send a scout around the back of the place to keep an eye on any of them trying to slip away." Gabe nods and then looks at him. "You're not coming?" The governor gazes out at the distant prison. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." He gazes back up at Gabe. "I'm riding on the tank." They come out of the east, with the sun at their backs, raising a dust storm. As they roar down the grade and across the valley, the governor rides on the nose of the tank, his gloved hand welded to the turret, as though he's mounted on a bucking bronco. The massive treads of the tank, as well as the enormous wheels of all the military vehicles, kick up the drought-wasted earth as they close in, engines singing high opera, an army of Valkyries swooping down upon the damned, the dust cloud so profuse now it practically engulfs the entire fleet. By the time they approach the outer access road, about 50 yards from the fence, a number of things have changed. All the walkers in the general vicinity, drawn to the noise and clamor, have now crowded in toward the east edge of the prison, the dead numbering 100 or more, an added layer of protection either planned or coincidental for those inside the prison. At the same time, frenzied voices have begun to echo across the cement lots behind the fence, the inhabitants caught off guard and now scrambling for cover. Adding to the pandemonium is the vast storm front of dust, now as big and thick as a Scirocco, completely swallowing the convoy. Blinded by the dust cloud, Lily slams on the brakes, nearly throwing her entire cargo bay of armed men and women through the cab's rear window. Austin slams against the dash, smacking his forehead on the windshield. Lily catches her breath and turns to Austin. "You all right?" "I'm good," he mutters, scrambling to get his gun up and ready. The dust cloud begins to clear. The harsh morning sun shines down through the nimbus like firelight through gauze, turning everything luminous and dreamlike. Lily's heart hammers in her chest. Her head throbs with nervous tension. Through the dirt-filmed windshield, she can see the prison's outer fence with its barbed crowns, thousands of feet long, teeming with walking dead. They swarm and burrow in toward the fence like wasps engulfing a nest, hundreds of them, all shapes and sizes and genders, snarling and drooling, moving as one great organism, driven mad by some innate demonic hunger, whipped into a frenzy by the noise of the convoy, the frantic movement inside the compound, and the smell of human flesh. Through her side window, in her peripheral vision, Lily senses movement. The governor has climbed out onto the tank's prow like a glorious figurehead on the forebeam of a ship, his chest puffed up with adrenaline and hubris. He raises his one gloved hand and points at the throngs of undead. His voice booms with the impact of a cannon shot. "Destroy them all! Now!" The fusillade erupts all across the pasture, a horizontal tornado ramming into columns of dead flesh, mesmerizing Lily, paralyzing her in ear-splitting wonder. Walkers begin erupting in gouts of blood and rotting tissue. Heads explode in choreographed sequential explosions as the .50 calibers fire up, full auto, skulls popping like great strings of light bulbs bursting and splattering the fence. Ragged bodies spin and pirouette in the dust. Spent shells spew into the air behind the vehicles with a profusion of fountains. The fence undulates and rattles with the mass slaughter, bodies piling up against the chain link. Lily doesn't even get a chance to lean out her window and fire a single shot. The massive onslaught of gunfire lasts only a few minutes, purely for show now. But in that time, it rips through the dead with the strength of a tsunami, a grisly red tide of destruction, shredding flesh and tearing limbs from their sockets and uncorking the tops of skulls and turning monstrous faces to red pulp. The noise is tremendous. Lily's ears ring and she puts her hands over them, flinching, as the very air around her thumps and vibrates. The cordite forms a blue cloud over the east edge of the prison until most of the walkers have gone down. As the last few corpses are slaughtered, much of the gunfire dwindles, until Lily can just barely hear over the ringing of her ears the frantic voices of human beings inside the prison barricades hollering at each other. "Get down! Stop! Lori, get down, goddammit! Andrea, stop!" But Lily can't see much of anything behind the veils of dust and gun smoke being whipped up by the display of force. At length, as the last few large-caliber blasts crackle in the fog-bound sunlight, Lily hears the sound of the governor's voice, now amplified by a bullhorn, piercing the intermittent popping of small arms fire. "Cease fire!" The last of the shooters draw down, and all at once an eerie silence grips the landscape. Lily stares through the dusty windshield at the tattered, mutilated, smoking bodies drifted against the fence. For one horrible instant, the sight of them registers in Lily's brain as a memory of atrocity photos she saw once from World War II. The bodies of prison camp victims, piled by bulldozers into snow-dusted ditches of mass graves. And the feeling it gives her makes her blink and shake her head and rub her eyes as she tries to drive the unbidden thoughts from her mind. The sound of a gravelly, smoky voice amplified by a bullhorn interrupts her stupor. "To anyone left inside, this is your last chance to make it out of this with your lives." Standing on the front bulwark of the Abrams tank, the governor aims the megaphone at the vast, deserted yards inside the fence, his voice echoing off the inner walls of cell blocks and administrative buildings. "I will not make a second offer." Lily silently climbs out of the cab, Austin emerging from the other side. They both crouch down behind the truck's massive front wheels with their guns ready to go. They peer around the edges of the doors at the prison in the middle distance, and all the deserted basketball courts and parking lots and exercise yards. Nothing moves within the confines of the fences. Only a few shadows flitting and flickering here and there across gaps between buildings. "You have killed and maimed us, and now you hide behind your fences. But your time is over!" This last word is pronounced with such venomous zeal that it seems to echo and penetrate the walls of the prison with the insidious half-life of an infectious disease. "We will show you mercy, but only under one condition." Lily glances over her shoulder at the governor, standing on the tank with the bullhorn. Even from this distance, 25, maybe 30 feet away, she can see his one visible eye blazing like a burning ember. The sound of his amplified voice is like a tin can being torn apart. "Open up the innermost gate. Gather up all your weapons, all guns, all ammo, any knives, whatever you have, the riot gear, everything, and pile it up in front of the innermost gate. Then I want you to close the gate, lock it, and wait while we clear away the biters." The governor pauses and listens to the silence. The stillness broken only by the fading echoes of his voice and the sound of engines softly idling all around him. "We don't have to kill each other. There's still a chance we can work together." More silence. From her position behind the M35's wheel, Lily can see more walkers coming from the north, shambling around the corner of the fence toward their fallen brethren. She surveys the vast exercise yard inside the fence, the weeds fringing cracks across the sun-bleached pavement, the stray wads of trash rolling in the breeze. She squints. She can barely make out a few dark objects lying here and there that at first glance look like discarded bundles of trash or clothing shifting in the wind. But the more she stares, the more she becomes convinced that they're humans crawling on their bellies for cover. "Do as I ask and open the gates." To Lily's ear, the governor's voice sounds almost reasonable, rational even, like a teacher explaining to his students with great regret the protocols of detention. He says into the megaphone, "This is your last chance." The governor lowers the bullhorn and calmly waits for a response. Lily crouches silently behind her door with the Remington rifle now gripped tightly in both hands, one sweaty finger on the trigger pad, and the pause that ensues, lasting only a few minutes, seems to go on for an eternity. The sun beats down on her neck. Sweat trickles down her back. Her stomach somersaults. She smells the faint stench of walkers on the wind, and it makes her nauseous. She can hear Austin's breathing on the other side of the cab, and she can see his shadow. He stares at the ground with his rifle cradled in his arms. All at once, a series of cramps twists Lily's gut, sending sharp daggers of pain through her midsection and seizing her up against the truck's fender. It feels like a circular saw tearing her in half, and she doubles over in agony. She tries to breathe. She feels the menstrual pad between her legs stinging and getting heavy, the flow of blood practically hemorrhaging inside her. She's been using tampons as well as pads since the miscarriage, and the flow has been off and on, but now the bleeding returns with a vengeance, either due to the stress or the aftermath of the exam, or both, and it's starting to drive her crazy. She tries to focus on the distant yards of the prison and ignore the cramps, but it's pretty much a losing battle now. The pain throbs and twinges within her, and she starts associating the misery inside her with the evil bastards inside this prison. She knows it's a stretch, but she can't help thinking, this is their fucking fault. This pain, this misery, this fire raging inside me, it's all because of them. Lily hears the low murmur of the governor's voice then, and it sends a fine layer of chills down her spine. From his perch on the tank, he mutters, "Motherfuckers. Can't make it easy." By this point, at least a dozen more walkers are lumbering toward the convoy, a few coming around the corners of the fence from the south and the west, and the governor lets out an exasperated sigh. At last, he raises the bullhorn. "Resume firing!" Barrels go up, bolt snapping shells into breeches, but before anybody gets a chance to fire another shot, the sound of a single high-powered rifle pops loudly in the still blue sky high above one of the guard towers. The blast strikes the governor's right shoulder just above the pectoral.